There's a city where the average lifespan was 25 years, where drinking water was contaminated with lead that slowly poisoned your brain, where 30% of children died before their first birthday, where infectious diseases spread so fast that entire neighborhoods could be wiped out in a week. It's called ancient Rome, and if you think you could survive there because you've watched Gladiator and read some history books, you're catastrophically wrong. In 165 AD, Roman soldiers returning from Parthia brought a disease to Rome. Modern historians call it the Antonine Plague, probably smallpox or measles. Within 2 years, it killed 2,000 people per day in Rome alone. 1/4 of the empire's population died. The plague lasted 15 years. No hospitals, just death, spreading through the city faster than bodies could be burned. In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted and buried Pompeii under 20 feet of volcanic ash. 2,000 people died instantly. But here's what the bodies reveal. Most Romans had terrible teeth from lead-sweetened wine, spinal damage from manual labor, and parasitic infections from contaminated water. The volcano killed them quickly. Daily life in Rome was killing them slowly. Every single day. In 390 BC, invading Gauls laid siege to Rome for 7 months. The city ran out of food. Romans ate dogs, rats, and leather. Then they ate the dead. When the siege finally lifted, half the population was gone, starved, diseased, or killed. Rome recovered and became an empire. But the lesson was clear. Survival in ancient Rome was never guaranteed, even for Romans. But here's what should terrify you about time traveling to ancient Rome. You wouldn't die in a gladiatorial arena or a battlefield. Those are quick deaths. You'd die slowly from lead poisoning in the water, or from a bacterial infection that modern antibiotics cure in 3 days, or from a routine injury that gets infected because no one understands germ theory, or from starvation because you don't know which foods are safe, or from violence because you accidentally insulted someone in a culture you don't understand. This is why you wouldn't survive one day in ancient Rome, what would kill you first, and why every comfort you take for granted would disappear the moment you arrived. Hour 1. The water will start poisoning. You arrive in Rome at dawn. You're thirsty. You need water. There are fountains everywhere. Rome's famous aqueduct system brings fresh water from the mountains. You cup your hands and drink. Congratulations, you just started poisoning yourself with lead. Roman aqueducts were lined with lead pipes. The Latin word for lead is plumbum. That's where we get plumbing. The Romans knew lead was poisonous. They wrote about it. Vitruvius, a Roman engineer, specifically warned that lead pipes contaminate water. But they used lead anyway because it was cheap, easy to work with, and lasted forever. The lead concentration in Roman water was 100 times higher than modern safety standards. Studies of Roman bones and teeth show lead levels that would cause severe cognitive impairment today. The Romans were literally poisoning themselves every time they drank water. Their decline in birth rates, increased mental instability in emperors, and general cognitive decline across the population, all consistent with chronic lead poisoning. But here's what would happen to you specifically. You're not adapted to lead exposure. Romans built tolerance over lifetimes of exposure. You haven't. The first drink might not hurt you. But after 1 day of drinking Roman water, you'd start feeling symptoms within hours. Headache, nausea, abdominal pain. Your kidneys would start filtering lead into your bloodstream. Within days, you'd have severe neurological symptoms. Within weeks, if you survived that long, you'd have permanent brain damage. And that's assuming the water only has lead. Roman aqueducts were open-air channels for dozens of miles. Birds defecated in them. Dead animals fell in. Bacteria multiplied. By the time water reached the city, it was contaminated with everything from bird feces to decomposing rats. The Romans didn't know about bacteria. They thought running water purified itself. They were wrong. So you can't drink the water. What about wine? Romans diluted wine with water. Same lead problem. What about milk? Romans didn't drink much milk, and what they had came from animals with diseases. What about beer? Romans considered beer a barbaric drink. You're in a city of 1 million people, and there's nothing safe to drink. You're already poisoned, and you don't even know it yet. Hour 3. The smell will make you vomit. 3 hours in, you realize ancient Rome doesn't just look different from the movies. It smells different. Specifically, it smells like a combination of sewage, rotting garbage, body odor, animal waste, and burning trash. The smell is so overwhelming that you physically gag. Welcome to the real Rome. Roman sanitation was better than medieval Europe's. But that's a low bar. Rome had the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer, which drained waste into the Tiber River. That sounds good until you realize most Romans didn't have direct sewer access. They used chamber pots and threw the contents out their windows into the street. The technical term was latrine, but the practical reality was walking down a Roman street meant dodging human waste. The streets were covered in garbage, animal dung and sewage. There were no garbage trucks, no street cleaners, no public sanitation services. People threw trash in the streets. Animals defecated everywhere. The smell in summer was so intense that wealthy Romans left the city entirely and retreated to country villas. The poor stayed and endured, but here's what makes it worse. Rome was densely packed. 1 million people in about 8 square miles. That's 125,000 people per square mile. Modern Manhattan has 70,000 people per square mile. Rome was nearly twice as dense, with none of the modern sanitation infrastructure. The concentration of human and animal waste in confined spaces created a smell you literally cannot imagine. The wealthy used perfumes to mask the stench. The poor just lived with it. You, arriving from the modern world where cities have sewage systems and garbage collection, would find the smell physically unbearable. Studies show that people from clean environments who are suddenly exposed to intense sewage odors experience nausea, vomiting, and severe psychological distress. You wouldn't adapt. You'd just suffer. And that smell? It's also a symptom of the disease environment that's about to kill you. Hour 5, the diseases will start their work. 5 hours in Rome. You've drunk contaminated water. You've breathed air thick with fecal particles. You've touched surfaces covered in bacteria. Your immune system, adapted to a modern environment with antibiotics, vaccines, and sanitation, is encountering pathogens it's never seen before. The countdown to serious illness has begun. Ancient Rome was a disease breeding ground. Typhoid, cholera, tuberculosis, malaria, dysentery, and various parasitic infections were endemic. A 2016 study analyzing Roman human remains found that intestinal parasites were present in 58% of samples. More than half of Romans had worms. The parasite load was so high that it stunted growth and caused chronic illness. But here's the catastrophic problem for you. You have no immunity to ancient strains of these diseases. Modern vaccines protect against some pathogens, but not ancient variants. Your immune system has never encountered the specific bacterial and viral strains circulating in ancient Rome. You're immunologically naive, a perfect target. Typhoid would be your most likely killer. It spreads through contaminated water and food. Symptoms start 6 to 30 days after exposure: fever, headache, abdominal pain, then delirium and death. The mortality rate without modern treatment is 20 to 30%. You drank the water. You ate the food. You're infected. You just don't know it yet. Malaria was endemic in Rome. The city was built on swamps. Mosquitoes bred everywhere. The Romans didn't understand the connection between mosquitoes and disease. They thought bad air, male, aria, bad air, literally caused illness. They were partially right. Swamps do create bad air, but they didn't know about the parasites mosquitoes carried. If you stay in Rome during summer, you're almost guaranteed to get malaria. Modern treatment with antimalarials works. Ancient Rome had no treatment. You just die, delirious with fever. Tuberculosis was everywhere. Studies of Roman skeletons show TB infection rates of 15 to 20%. It spreads through airborne droplets. One cough from an infected person in a crowded Roman apartment building, and you're exposed. TB kills slowly, months or years, but without antibiotics, it's eventually fatal. Multiple pathogens are incubating in your body. You still feel fine. That won't last. Hour 8. You'll eat something that poisons you 8 hours in Rome, and you're hungry. You need to eat. You find a street vendor selling food. Thermopolia were ancient Rome's fast food restaurants. You buy something that looks safe. Maybe bread, maybe cheese, maybe grilled meat. You eat it. You've just made a potentially fatal mistake. Roman food safety didn't exist. There were no health inspections, no temperature controls, no understanding of bacteria. Meat sat in the sun for hours. Dairy products weren't refrigerated. Fish and shellfish were sold at room temperature. Everything that could grow bacteria did grow bacteria. But the bigger problem is what Romans added to their food. Garum was the most popular Roman condiment, fermented fish sauce made by leaving fish guts in the sun for months until they liquefied. It was high in salt, which prevented some bacterial growth, but it was also fermented with bacteria the modern digestive system isn't adapted to. Eating garum would give you immediate and severe digestive distress. Then there's the lead problem again. Romans used lead acetate as a sweetener. They called it sugar of lead because it had a sweet taste. They added it to wine, fruit, and desserts. They boiled grape juice in lead pots to concentrate it into a syrup called defrutum, which had lead concentrations high enough to cause acute poisoning. Eating a Roman dessert could literally poison you. The bread was problematic too. Roman mills used millstones that shed grit into the flour. Bread was gritty enough to wear down teeth. Archaeological evidence shows Romans had terrible dental health, teeth worn to nubs by age 30, and abscesses, infections. That gritty bread would damage your teeth too. And in a world without dentistry, a tooth infection can kill you through sepsis. But here's what would get you fastest: food poisoning. Meat and dairy spoil within hours in Mediterranean heat. Romans tried to mask spoilage with heavy spices and sauces. You can't tell by taste whether meat is contaminated with Salmonella, E. coli, or Campylobacter. You eat it. Within 24 hours, you'd have severe diarrhea and vomiting. Dehydration kills fast. And remember, you can't drink the water safely, so you can't rehydrate properly. Food poisoning that would be an uncomfortable day in the modern world becomes life-threatening in ancient Rome. Your digestive system is under assault. The cramping will start soon. Hour 12. The violence will find you 12 hours in Rome. It's midday. The city is crowded. You're trying to navigate streets you don't understand. Speaking Latin you barely know, wearing clothes that mark you as foreign. Someone bumps into you. Hard. You turn around to say something. Wrong move. He punches you in the face. Welcome to Roman street life. Ancient Rome was staggeringly violent. The vigiles were primarily firefighters who occasionally broke up fights, but they weren't police. There was no 911 to call. If you were attacked, you fought back, or you died. The murder rate in ancient Rome is estimated at 25 under 50 per 100,000 people. Modern New York City has a murder rate of 5 per 100,000. Rome was 5 to 10 times more dangerous. The violence was casual and constant. Arguments over business deals ended in stabbings. Drunks fought in the streets. Gangs controlled neighborhoods. Roman historians casually mention street violence the way modern writers mention traffic. It was just part of daily life. But here's why you specifically are in danger. You don't understand Roman social rules. You don't know what gestures are insulting. You don't know what words are fighting words. You don't know which neighborhoods are controlled by which gangs. Everything you do marks you as an ignorant foreigner, easy prey. Roman honor culture made violence inevitable. If someone insulted you and you didn't respond, you were a coward. If someone challenged you and you backed down, you lost social standing. Masculinity was tied to physical dominance. Romans fought to defend their honor over things modern people would ignore. You, with modern sensibilities about violence, would either fight constantly or be labeled a coward, both of which get you killed. And the legal system won't protect you. If you're wealthy and Roman, you might get justice. If you're a foreigner with no connections, you're nobody. Killing you has no consequences. Your body would be dumped in the Tiber, and no one would investigate. You'd disappear, and the historical record would never know you existed. Someone wants to fight you, and you don't know why. Choose wrong, and you're dead. Power 16. The housing will crush you, literally. 16 hours in Rome. It's getting dark. You need somewhere to sleep. You can't afford a villa. Those are for the ultra-wealthy. You find an insula, a multi-story apartment building where most Romans lived. You rent a room on the 5th floor. You lie down to sleep. At 2 a.m., the building collapses. You die instantly, crushed under tons of rubble. This actually happened constantly. Roman apartment buildings were death traps. They were built cheaply and quickly by developers trying to maximize profit. 6 or 7 stories tall, built with wood frames and brick, with no building codes and no safety inspections. Fires spread through them even more often. Living in a Roman insula was playing Russian roulette with building failure. The satirist Juvenal wrote about this in the 1st century A.D. He described living in Rome as terrifying because buildings collapsed without warning. "Who at Rome fears the collapse of his house?" he wrote sarcastically. Everyone feared it. It happened all the time. Emperors passed laws trying to limit building height because taller buildings collapsed more often. Developers ignored the laws. Buildings kept collapsing, but even if the building doesn't collapse, the fire will get you. Rome had devastating fires every few years. The Great Fire of 64 AD burned for 6 days and destroyed 70% of the city. Thousands died, but smaller fires happened weekly. Roman buildings were made of wood and filled with oil lamps, charcoal braziers, and open flames. No sprinkler systems, no fire escapes. Everyone above was trapped. The vigils tried to fight fires, but they were understaffed and poorly equipped. They had buckets and hand pumps. That's it. When a Roman building caught fire, it usually burned completely. Your best chance of survival was jumping from a window, which from the 5th floor meant broken bones at minimum, death more likely. Here's the horrible calculus. Wealthy Romans lived in ground-floor villas with private courtyards. Safe from collapse, easy to escape from fires. Poor Romans lived in upper floors of insulae. Cheap rent, but you're living in a structure that could collapse or burn at any moment. You, as a time traveler with no money and no connections, would be on the top floor. The most dangerous position. You're trying to sleep in a building that might kill you before morning. Hour 20. The sanitation will give you dysentery. 20 hours in Rome. Your stomach is cramping. You need a bathroom. Romans had public latrines, communal toilets, where dozens of people sat side by side on marble benches with holes, doing their business together. No privacy, no toilet paper. Instead, a tersorium, a sponge on a stick that was shared among users and rinsed in a communal bucket of water. You're about to get dysentery from a communal ass-wiping sponge. Roman public latrines were bacterial breeding grounds. No running water in the toilets themselves, just a channel underneath that occasionally flushed with drainage from the baths. Feces sat there for hours or days. The smell was intense. The bacteria multiplied unchecked. Romans thought sitting together and chatting while defecating was normal social behavior. They had no concept of germ transmission. That shared sponge is your death sentence. Multiple people used it. No one cleaned it properly. Fecal bacteria transferred directly from person to person. E. coli, Shigella, Salmonella, parasitic worm eggs, everything transmitted through that one sponge. Modern studies of Roman latrines show they were more dangerous than not having latrines at all. The communal sanitation spread disease faster than individual waste disposal. But it gets worse. Romans bathed in communal bathhouses. Hundreds of people shared the same water, which wasn't changed frequently. People with open sores, infections, and diseases all soaked in the same pools. The water temperature was warm, perfect for bacterial growth. Bathing in a Roman bathhouse wasn't getting clean. It was marinating in other people's bacteria. Dysentery would hit you within 24-48 hours of using a Roman latrine. Severe diarrhea, abdominal cramping, fever, dehydration. The mortality rate for dysentery in the ancient world was 10 to 20%. Modern treatment involves antibiotics and rehydration. Ancient Rome had neither. You'd either recover on your own through sheer immune response, or you'd die dehydrated and delirious. The bacteria you picked up from Roman sanitation are multiplying in your intestines. The symptoms will start soon. Hour 24. You realize you're going to die here 24 hours. One day in ancient Rome, you're sick, poisoned, injured, and terrified. Your head is pounding from lead exposure. You have cuts that are infected because there's no antibacterial ointment. You're dehydrated because you can't safely drink anything. You're sleeping in a building that might collapse. You're surrounded by diseases you have no immunity to. And you finally understand you're not going to survive this. Modern people think they could survive in ancient times because we romanticize the past. We watch movies where Rome is clean marble buildings and noble warriors. We read histories that focus on emperors and battles. We imagine ourselves as Romans, living in that world, thriving through our modern knowledge and intelligence. But that's delusional. You wouldn't be a Roman. You'd be a foreign nobody, with no connections, no money, no legal protection, and no understanding of how the society actually works. You wouldn't have time to use your modern knowledge because you'd be too busy dying from preventable causes. The lead in the water would poison you before you could do anything meaningful. The bacteria in the food would give you dysentery before you could establish yourself. The diseases in the air would infect you before you could earn money. The violence in the streets would kill you before you could make allies. The building you're sleeping in would collapse before you could find better housing. Ancient Rome had an average lifespan of 25 years, not because Romans were weaker than modern humans, because the environment was trying to kill everyone, constantly, in hundreds of different ways. Lead poisoning, bacterial infections, parasitic diseases, contaminated water, spoiled food, building collapses, fires, violence, industrial accidents, and complete lack of medical care. The Romans who survived to adulthood were the ones whose immune systems adapted to constant pathogen exposure, whose bodies tolerated lead poisoning, whose luck kept them away from collapsing buildings and street violence. You don't have that adaptation. You don't have that tolerance. You don't have that luck. You have modern immune system adapted to a clean environment. You have modern expectations of food safety, water purity, and housing stability. You have modern understanding that disease comes from germs, not bad air or divine punishment. But none of that knowledge saves you because you can't create antibiotics from scratch. You can't build a water filtration system alone. You can't force Romans to understand germ theory. You would die in ancient Rome, not from gladiators or warfare, from the same things that killed most Romans: disease, poisoning, accidents, and violence. The only difference is that Romans were adapted to that environment. You're not. Why history isn't romantic. It's a graveyard. Time travel fantasies always focus on the exciting parts of history. The battles, the political intrigue, the famous figures. They ignore the boring ways history killed people: contaminated water, advanced engineering, sophisticated government, impressive military, rich culture. It was a death trap for most people who lived there. The average Roman lived in poverty, drank poisoned water, ate contaminated food, worked brutal manual labor, and died young from preventable diseases. You wouldn't survive because survival in ancient Rome required being born there, adapting to the diseases, tolerating the lead, understanding the social rules, and having incredible luck. You have none of those advantages. You're a modern person dropped into an ancient environment. Except the water is also trying to kill the fish. The past isn't a vacation destination. It's a hostile environment where everything from the water you drink to the bed you sleep in is trying to end your life. Modern people survive because we've spent centuries eliminating the things that killed our ancestors. Clean water, safe food, antibiotics, vaccines, building codes, police forces, emergency services. Remove all of that, and modern humans die just as fast as ancient Romans did. You wouldn't survive one day in ancient Rome. Not because you're weak. Because ancient Rome was a death trap that killed 30% of children before age 5, gave lead poisoning to everyone who lived there, spread disease through contaminated water and communal sanitation, housed people in collapsing buildings, and offered no medical care for any of it. The movies lied to you. Rome wasn't marble temples and noble warriors. It was lead-poisoned water, sewage-covered streets, disease-ridden apartments, and casual violence. The Romans who survived were tough beyond modern comprehension. One day in ancient Rome, 24 hours. That's all it would take for you to realize that history isn't romantic. It's a graveyard, and you're about to become part of it.